Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
I am still not Greg. I want to be Greg every time that the show starts, and I'm still not him. My name is Craig Collins, filling in for Greg. Jim is here with us, of course. How are you doing today, bud?
I am doing pretty good. I really enjoyed the Independence Day holiday weekend.
Nice.
And wish it could have been an entire week.
Sure.
Also, thank you to all the listeners who wished me a happy birthday. It was on Saturday. My birthday should always be on a Saturday. And not only that, first of all, the nice thing about being born on July 5th is that the entire country celebrates your birthday a day early.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
usually they mark your birthday with like hangovers and feeling kind of exhausted and
Sure.
wishing they didn't have to go to work. So I argue July 5th should be a national holiday. A, for my birthday, and B, so everyone has a day off from the partying of the night before.
Yeah, it's like a birthday week or a birthday month, but this one is for the country. And then you would get to, you get to celebrate as well. Okay, cool. We have a few different martinis, of course, to get to, as we always do on the show. First, the good. And I do love the way that this was talked about here, the way that you summarized all this. Yeah, the big, beautiful bill was a mixed bag, to say the very least about it, but it crossed the finish line. And that seems like a good thing for you, Jim? Yes?
Yeah, look, there was a bunch of things in this bill that we talked about last week, not a huge fan of. I don't think eliminating taxes on tips makes much economic sense. And in fact, for about 40% of tipped workers, they don't make enough money to qualify for income taxes, so it's not going to make a huge difference for them. We complained about state and local tax deductions. I recognized it was going to have to go up because of the slim majority in the House. It's got quadrupled, and I think that's probably not one of the more cost-effective ways you could, reduce federal revenues and get a good economic bang for your buck. But no credit, credit where it's due. The tax cuts passed by Trump and Republicans back in 2017 needed to be extended. That will now occur. And the other thing which I was thinking about is that, they set a 4th of July deadline. There was really slow going for a long stretch. Remember, after a couple months of this administration, people were saying, they've only passed, they passed the Lincoln-Riley bill, and then there was a long stretch of not passing any significant legislation. Well, whether or not you believe it's beautiful, it is a big bill. It makes just about the entire economic agenda of the Trump administration into law, or at least a really big chunk of their domestic agenda. And I also think somebody who probably didn't get enough credit in all of this, Mike Johnson, who came into this with an exceptionally narrow House majority. He got a little bit better with the unfortunate passing of 3 House Democrats. But it's not like he had a huge one, and it's not like they could afford to lose too many. They lost 2 Republicans who voted no. Brian Fitzpatrick, not a surprise, probably the most swingiest district in Bucks County up in Pennsylvania. Chip Roy, I think everybody kind of knew was going to be difficult. But by and large, House Republicans held together and got a really big consequential piece of legislation passed. So now, the argument, why haven't they got, bills to the president's desk? They did it on July 4th, and they could take them out. Now, is this going to be easy to run on in 2026? Probably not. But, this is why you win these elections, is because you want to be able to change policy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you entirely on everything you just said there. It's interesting, though, because now that Elon Musk is going to fund a bunch of opposition parties, even more so, what you said is true. Is it going to be easy to run on in 2026 against Elon's money? Probably not, is probably the right word there.
We call that foreshadowing in the podcasting business.
Thank you. I feel very proud of myself for foreshadowing here. I'm getting closer to Greg Columbus every day. Probably still not there, though.
If the thought of Elon Musk forming a third party is keeping you up at night, and you have bags under your eyes, and you're getting wrinkles and all of that, well, then you probably need some products from Caldera Lab. Let's be real. Most skincare products are not made for men, and when they are, they're usually not great. They're overly complicated, packed with questionable ingredients, or they just don't deliver the results. But Caldera Lab's high-performance skincare is made just for men. Simple, effective, and science-backed. It's an award-winning serum with 27 botanicals and powerful antioxidants to protect against daily stressors, like, say, somebody forming a third party. The eye serum targets dark circles, puffiness, and tired eyes with peptides and adaptogens. The base layer is a lightweight moisturizer with plant stem cells and snow mushroom for deep hydration and a matte finish. And remember, all of this is formulated for men, created by expert cosmetic chemists specializing in men's skincare. Skincare does not have to be complicated, but it should be good. Upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to calderalab.com/3ml. That's the numeral 3ml. And use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order.
That's right. We move on to the bad for our 3 Martini lunch today. Still thrilled to be here filling in with you. That is Jim. I am Greg. I am not Greg. I don't know why I just did that. Elon.
It sounds very similar. We're Identity Crisis Monday.
Yeah, I'm just trying real hard today to be him. All right, Elon is starting a brand new party. This sounds vaguely familiar to a lot of us, and unfortunately, a man who would be very happy about this passed away in 2024. But Jim, what do you want to say about Elon's brand new America party?
Let me say, as someone who had observed that this bill is going to increase the deficit, that the deficit increases are significantly larger than all of the savings generated by DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. I had a piece in National Review magazine kind of laying out that I don't want to completely poo-poo what DOGE has done, but Elon Musk stood on that stage in Madison Square Garden and said he was going to find $2 trillion in savings. And then he later said, I meant to say $1 trillion, which, by the way, like when you cut it in half, like after, that's not great. Yeah. I think they're in the 185 billion with a B, not with a TR. And so, like, that's not nothing. But the bill is, the big, beautiful bill is increasing by like 3.9 trillion over 10 years. So, not what you want to see. So Musk is frustrated with it. He's saying, all right, I'm going to form a third party. We're going to call it the America Party. Craig, for starters, I think that's kind of generic. I think it's kind of, like the other leading party. Like, now he doesn't do X. The X party would at least sound like, hey, dude, I'm going to the X party.
I was actually amazed it's not called the X party. But thank you. Continue. Yeah.
The America Party doesn't give you any sense of what it stands for. And the fact that Musk is been, banging the drum most loudly over the deficit and the debt, my heart says, great. Good. And I'm glad to see somebody calling attention to this. My head says, if Americans really cared about the deficit and the debt, the two parties would be clamoring to do something about it by now. That the reason both parties don't care about the debt is because the voting electorate doesn't care about the debt. And that's the heart of the problem there. Elon, if you want to spend your fortune to try to educate Americans about the consequences of the debt, how much we spend in interest, how much this is, you could do that. It would do some good. I looked it up, Craig, and I found out that, presidential level, yes, this is the toughest level to run a race, but last year, 98.1% of all Americans voted a ballot for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. 4 years earlier, 98.1% of Americans voted for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. 4 years before that, 94.3%. And then I looked, it's a very similar story in Senate races and in House races. Americans, people say, I hate the two parties. Some people say they're too similar, which I don't think is a particularly, like they can be too similar on certain issues, but I don't think you could say broadly that they are indistinguishable. And you could say the argument that, I want another option. I want a better option. But when like the Libertarian Party's out there, the Green Party's out there, there are other parties out there, and almost no one votes for them. So like Americans, like what Americans say and the way they actually vote are very different. And I think if Elon wants to get this into a real endeavor, he's going to have to think through, how do you do this? He's talked about maybe only running in a few Senate cases, only in a few House races. If you concentrate your efforts, maybe that probably does you some good, but I don't know. We still don't know what those districts are going to be. And in all likelihood, you're probably going to pick off more people from the right. I could be wrong. We'll see how things shake out. But in all likelihood, you're probably going to elect more Democrats.
Right. Yeah, I think in all likelihood you're going to create a party that might, continue to hurt the Conservative Party the way you said, which makes a lot of sense. I have a question for you though, and I'm curious about this. Could Donald Trump have won from an independent party? Is he a unique enough politician? And if there were someone that came along, and I doubt that this happens, that could garner enough attention, maybe a celebrity that's turning into a politician, could that person anchor a new party to a win, a significant win, maybe a Senate win, maybe bigger than that? Because that's the only thing I kept thinking of is it might matter who the politician or the individual is they choose as to how likely they could actually garner enough support to win a race.
If somebody asks, Jim, what is the National Review cover that sold the most on the newsstand in the last couple of years? When David French, who, by the way, people, I hate David French. He left National Review a long time ago. He went to the Dispatch, and then he went to New York Times. So
that's funny.
But he wrote a cover piece saying how terrific Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was. And one of the interesting things about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is that every once in a while, he kind of dips his toe into a discussion of taking care of veterans. That he's his pride in his country. Like he kind of But he doesn't get that overtly political. And in fact, I think in the last election, he said something about how he didn't really want to alienate people who saw things differently. And so I think that, a little bit of that Michael Jordan, Republicans, buy sneakers too. So, but anyway, so by the way, that issue was apparently had the most news because, like, for a moment we looked like Us Weekly. For a moment, National Review looked like People Magazine. What's new with it? And I bet you they were shocked. People who casually picked it up and said, "Wait, it's hard to imagine which celebrity would have the star power to do it." For years, people speculated, "Oh, what if Oprah runs?" We keep hearing about big name celebrities deciding to jump in to run for president, and it doesn't happen. So my suspicion is that most of them look at it and decide it's not worth it. And my last conclusion would be, Craig, you cannot tell me that Stephen A. Smith is going to be the kind of guy who's going to jump in and run or run for the Democrat. Yeah.
All right. Not that I think Stephen could win, but that would be wonderful if that man was in some
debate. Love to see
debate.
him on a debate stage.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. And great Stephen A. impression, too, by the way, Jim.
I wish I had more to that, because Jay Farrow on Saturday Night Live did a great one, and he used to do it regularly on Weekend Update.
They need that back. All right, now we move on to the crazy in our 3 Martini Lunch. This is excellent, and this is crazy because so many people that thought electing President Trump would give them a very different answer to this question are getting the answer they didn't want at all. Jim, what is this third crazy Martini?
Sure. News first reported by Axios, but now being reported everywhere. The Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation will announce this week that there is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein kept a client list. There's no evidence that he blackmailed anyone, nor is there any evidence Epstein's death was anything but a suicide. Now, I looked it up, Craig. It's like 6 years coming up on since his death. I told as many, I better hang this painting because, like Jeffrey Epstein, it's not going to hang itself, jokes over the years as much as anybody, right? Sure. It was really, the circumstances of his death, the fact that he was left alone, the fact that he had what people would assume a lot of dirt on a lot of powerful. I get why people believed that he had been secretly murdered or somebody had been out to get him, and that there were a whole bunch of people with dirty secrets too. And he was extremely well connected amongst just about every celebrity and businessman and politicians you could think. So, but what's really intriguing about this one is that as of February, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, was on Fox News and was asked, is it true the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients, right? There's very specific, the client list. And Bondi responded, quote, "It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies." Now, the first clue that maybe what she was talking about was not the client list that everybody is thinking about is Roberts follows up. "So have you seen anything that made you say, oh my gosh?" And by the way, I think it's a really perfect way of putting that question. And she responded, "Not yet." Okay. Also, and I don't mean to pick on FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. I interviewed him many years ago, back when he was best known as a former Secret Service agent. But when he had a podcast, Dan Bongino explicitly said that all kinds of celebrities, including the Clintons, were deeply connected. And he did not talk about it as, this is my belief, this is my theory. He acted as if it was proven fact. And he kept saying, as recently as February of this year, Trump administration has already began. He hasn't been named deputy director. He's still doing his podcast, and he says, Marsha Blackburn, who has been all over this. She's a senator in Tennessee, a Republican, obviously. And she's like, "Hey, man, is it time now? It's time to start overturning that rock and seeing what's underneath," unquote. Well, now Dan Bongino's FBI is saying, never mind. There's nothing there. I returned over the rock. It was just that. Now, if you say to me, the client list doesn't exist, that actually doesn't shock me. In part because, Craig, I can remember the episode of The Wire where he says
great reference.
Idris Elba says to the naive "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy?"
Yes.
If Epstein had a list of people who were clients of his sex trafficking, that he might keep it in his head, or he might keep the list divided up or something, that he wouldn't want to have that in one place because it'd be extremely dangerous. And, oh, by the way, it would effectively be make the indictment of him much, much easier. Look, he was up to all kinds of shady things. Yes, I understand why people are very suspicious of those who were friends with Epstein and hung around him. Bill Clinton being on his flights for all those times. Bill Clinton saying he barely knew him. I can't.
Weird.
I won't use bad words on this podcast. I also tend to believe that if there was any evidence linking Bill Clinton to this or any other prominent, Democratic celebrity, well, then by golly, Bondi and Bongino and Kash Patel and all these guys would be running, like they would not hesitate, right? The same argument, well, clearly they're covering this up to protect Trump. Craig, I've always thought, so you're telling me that there's evidence out there connecting Trump to Epstein, or that he killed him, or something like that. And that somewhere that evidence is out there, and it wasn't found by Merrick Garland. It wasn't found by Tish James. It wasn't found by anybody else, or it did get found. And Alvin Bragg, the district attorney of Manhattan, looked at it and said, you know what? I'm going to go after him on the falsifying business records. I really think I got him. That'll take him down. That, like killing Epstein, banging underage girls, that's small potatoes. It's the misfiling of the payments to Stormy Daniels that's going to destroy this guy.
That's where we're going to get him. I love something you referenced. I love a lot of things you just said. But Dan Bongino is someone who gave up his prominent radio show / podcast. As a bit of insider information, my cousin wound up assuming the role of that show. So I'm fairly well connected to those, not Dan, but to the people who run that thing. Like, he gave up a huge, huge thing to go be the deputy director of the FBI. And I think the assumption was that he would find all the stuff he talked about in his podcast and prove it. Like, I think that was part of the reason that was such a great idea. I'm not speaking for anyone. I don't know that firsthand. I believe that that's kind of what I've gained. And to not have it happen seems like the biggest punch in the gut that I've seen there. And I doubt Bongino is remotely thrilled by that information, again, just as a guess. And I think he did, I assume, go in thinking that it was going to be bombshell after bombshell that would be shared with the American people.
Yeah, and there's, in legal terms, there's this concept of an admission against interest, which the jury can determine to be more likely to be valid, as in people generally don't run around saying things that aren't true that make them look bad. Bongino himself hasn't come out and made this statement, but the Department of Justice and FBI coming out and saying there is no there, there wasn't a client list, there was no blackmail, and as far as we could, all the evidence points to a suicide. I'm getting convinced because that's a lot of egg on the face of people like Dan Bongino. And for that matter, Pam Bondi. And I think it's not good for her to say it's on my desk. Now, I'm sure what she's going to say is, well, no, I meant other files. I meant other papers relating to that. But that's not what the question was about. And I think it's really bad to have the chief law enforcement officers of this country going out on Fox News or any other media and saying things that aren't true. We need to be able to trust law enforcement, and they have a lot of egg on their face this morning. Some of us a little bit less than shocked, but still a little surprised. But this, because this is such an admission against interest for everybody in the Trump administration, you would think this would actually put it to bed. But Craig, I'm sure someone will say, nope, just means they're in on the conspiracy. The aliens got to them.
That's the funniest thing, because yes, I have seen that. I've seen takes already out there saying, they're protecting something, or there's some reason they're being threatened, etc. All the conspiracy theories keep going down the rabbit hole. But as you said, the reason I most believed this, the moment it came out, is the group of people who are telling me about it. If this had come out during Biden's presidency, I would have ignored it. Most people would have ignored it and assumed there was something going on. But it comes out now with Bongino and Patel and everyone being the people behind it. There's no reason to keep thinking that this is a conspiracy that you don't have information on. It seems like it's time for all of us to move on from Epstein.
Or that's what you'd want people to do, wouldn't you, Craig?
Right. The man holding the gun on the other side of this camera is telling me to say this.
The only way to put yourself above suspicion is to be the one leading the charge against it. So
there you go. Anyway. That's great.
Anyway, great start to the week, Craig.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. This was fun as always.
Everyone, that was Craig Collins filling in for Greg. I'm Jim Garrity from National Review. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast. Also, we thank you deeply for your 5-star ratings. And we thank you pretty much for your 4-star ratings. Anything below that? I don't know if we need that. Get us on your home devices. All you have to do is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Get all of us on X. Craig is at Radio Craig C. I am at Jim Garrity, and Greg is at Greg Corumbus. Have a great day, and join us tomorrow for the 3 Martini Lunch.